Many Americans are fed up with America's failing two-party political system. The polls are clear. The number of Americans supporting the idea of a third political party is at historic highs, while at the same time the number of Americans identifying as independent is also at historic highs. This isn't to mention the fact that a high number of even Democrats have a more positive view of socialism over capitalism. Americans no longer view socialism or communism as the dark economic forces that many of us were brainwashed to believe. The establishment is fully aware of these trends and are desperately using all apparatuses of government and the media, including some so-called independent media outlets, to fight back. It's amazing to watch these people adopt the exact same talking points, sounding almost like parrots repeating their masters. These are people whose success is largely based on talking about what's wrong with America, more so than taking to the streets to personally confront the issues head on. One recent talking point that has been used recently to attack various activists and protesters is the condescending question, "What have you done?" Before I explain the obvious disingenuous intent behind this question, I'd like to focus on the elitist mentality of anyone who would ask such a question in the first place. The words themselves seem harmless, but because they've been used against citizens who dare to question some of America's celebrity politicians, underneath is a bit of fascism. The implication is, if you've never organized, or if you hold no power, you need to shut up and let the more popular boutique activists lead the way. This totally ignores the fact many of America's most impactful movements were started by people who, at least at the time, were completely unknown to the American public. They usually had no wealth and certainly no power. In fact, I won't even bother to list any examples because this is such a commonly known fact. On the very day that I'm making this video, I have plans to eat dinner in a restaurant that, if not for the brave activism of a handful of completely unknown American citizens in the 1960s, I may not be allowed to dine in even today. If you ask 20 highly educated Americans to name the people involved in the Greensboro sit-in, you'd be lucky if any of them could name even one, much less two or three. If we ever allow these evil people to convince us to wait for change to come from those who have instead of the have-nots, we're certainly in for some of the hardest times in our nation's history. There's no more loyal soldier than the soldier who has a dog in the fight. Now let's discuss why the question is disingenuous in the first place. To do this, all we need to do is focus on the studio journalist that has made this talking point so popular among themselves and the lapdogs that follow them. So not to be accused of attacking anyone personally, I'll simply refer to them as just that, studio journalist. The label studio journalist is very appropriate because they even attack the credibility of boots-on-the-ground journalists like Aaron Maté, Max Blumenthal, and a few others. I refer to these journalists as boots-on-the-ground journalists not only because they participate and report on activism in the United States, but also in other countries, including the struggles of average people who reside in war zones. These journalists also have experience participating in various UN proceedings and investigations.
Thanks everyone for coming out. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I observed around Caracas, and we will show you some of our video. You can see all of our work at thegrayzone.com. That's Gray, and it's not a hair club for men.
I'm very honored to be here once again. I really appreciate the opportunity. So it has been 3 years since the alleged chemical attack in Duma, and nearly 2 years since the cover-up of the OPCW investigation into Duma was exposed.
However, among the studio journalists that attacked them, not one has ever covered a potentially dangerous protest abroad, much less inside of a war zone. Not one has ever exposed high crimes by any government, large or small. Yet they attack journalists like Glenn Greenwald. When confronting actual journalists, the most common attack used by the studio journalists is to engage in a bit of McCarthyism, frequently implying that the real journalist is a tool of Russia or Vladimir Putin himself. Though the boots-on-the-ground journalists would be well within their rights to do so, not one has ever asked the studio journalists who attacked them, "What have you done to deserve the right to attack me?" And there lies the difference between a neoliberal fascist and a true progressive. Obviously, these studio journalists will attack anyone attempting to apply political pressure to their favorite politicians, and in doing so, they will use whichever disingenuous method is most convenient. No one is born with an activist resume in their hands. Everyone has to begin somewhere. The whole premise of asking "what have you done" is to shut you down. Politicians no longer work for the people, they work for their donors. And while you may be fighting for a modern-day New Deal, most of their donors have been working diligently to dismantle the original one. The whole idea is to keep you from fighting for a new one. As for the lapdog commoners that follow these celebrity politicians, these people are caught up in the celebrity of the politicians. And like most celebrities, these politicians have fans that think they can do no wrong, even when they're clearly in the wrong. Simply put, just ignore these people and keep fighting for what you know is right, no matter what talking points they use and no matter what propaganda they throw your way. Stay strong. And like always, stay safe.